So I'd like to introduce Tim Musty. He's one of our supervisors in the fellowship. We do our school rotation with him, and he gives us a bunch of lectures, so we know him well. He's currently a social worker with the Tucson Unified School District, a part-time clinical lecturer in the Department of Psychiatry, and he's been affiliated with the department since 1981. And he's a clinical social worker in private practice. He graduated from University of Wisconsin School of Social Work in 1970 and received a postmaster's degree certificate in psychiatric social work from the Menninger Foundation in 1973. He's worked in a variety of settings, both inpatient and outpatient, with children, adolescents, adults, and families, spanning 38 years in Tucson. And he has a special interest in ADHD and the intervention strategies used for this condition. So today he's going to be speaking about concurrent use of cognitive, behavioral, and parent training in therapy with children and adolescents. Thanks.
All right, welcome everybody. I hope the computer system works here. I was here practicing and it died on me, so I'm praying it'll stay together. Okay, so what we're going to talk about today is the use of cognitive behavioral therapy with children and adolescents and concurrent parenting training using a program called Active Parenting. Active parenting is actually designed to do with parent groups, but what I do in my private practice is I just set it up so parents can watch the video in a separate office. Okay. All right, so we'll start with the slides here, and I have to apologize. I'm technically totally incompetent, so I struggle with all this stuff. Okay, so how this all started for me was in the mid-90s. I did several parenting groups in my school job as a school social worker, and those were in elementary schools, the middle school, and high school. The other thing I was doing in the mid-90s, I was working as an in-home family therapist with PACT, which is now Providence, and La Hacienda, which is now Devereaux. So as I was working with these families, I realized that I needed something to help the parents with their parenting skills. So I began bringing the active parenting videos to the people's houses. And in those days, of course, we used videos. Nowadays, we're using DVDs. So, and would actually show those to the parents and discuss them with them. And then in 1996, I started using the cognitive behavioral workbooks with children and teens. Okay, and then actually and more formally, I've been in private practice actually since 1994, but in 2000 I began showing these active parenting videos regularly to parents of the children and adolescents I see in my private practice. And I did see that some parents were able to relate to the video examples and seemed to find some meaning in them. Some parents could talk about the concepts, but few could actually implement them in their families. Okay, so I just want to say briefly that the active parenting program carries with it, as a part of the actual parent group, they carry parent workbooks. So I do offer parents parent workbooks if they wish. I purchase them on a cost-only basis, meaning I only charge parents what it costs me to get the workbook. So there's Active Parenting Now in 3, which is for children ages 6 to 12. And then there's Active Parenting of Teens, which is teenagers from 13 to 17. So actually parents, they can't get these in a bookstore because they're sold by active parenting publishers, but they can get them through the big internet, what's the name of that? You guys, I don't shop online, but what's it called? Amazon, thank you. I don't shop online, so anyway, so I do sometimes, and some parents choose to purchase the workbooks, some do not. Okay, now some parents, of course, are very negative about the whole idea of a parenting program and say, no, I've tried all that, nothing works with my child. But I found that parents who have an open mind and are willing to try these techniques very often and read about some of the concepts and practice them at home will often achieve good results in working with their children and adolescents. Okay, I use 4 primary cognitive behavioral workbooks in my practice. These are the Coping Cat workbook, which is designed to use with children, and it could be also used with adolescents who have anxiety disorders. I do have a reference list that I believe was going to be copied for each of you. That lists all these references and the publishers. The other one, Keeping Your Cool, is an anger management workbook. That is the workbook I've gotten the most mileage out of it. I've used it as young as 6-year-old children all the way up to 19-year-olds. Mood Management, the Cognitive Behavioral Skills Building Program for Adolescents, is primarily designed to be done with a group of adolescents. I don't do it with groups. I only do it with my adolescents individually in my private practice. And it's quite a short workbook, actually. The Coping Cat workbook has, I think, about 15 lessons. The Keeping Your Cool has about 22 lessons. And the Mood Management workbook has the shortest one. That's about 6 lessons. And the last one is the Think Good, Feel Good. It's a cognitive behavior therapy workbook for children and young people. And I didn't misspell behavior. It's written by some folks in England, so the terms they use are different than American terms. And one of the ones that the kids really get a kick out of is there's an example of eating tea. Well, we don't eat tea in this country, we drink tea, but in England they eat tea. Okay, the first session protocol in working with children and adolescents is I send parents ahead of the session, I send them a child behavior checklist, and then have them bring it with them to the session. Then I obtain a brief developmental history, conduct a mental status evaluation with the child or the teen. And with teenagers, I discuss beginning treatment goals. At least in clinical social work, we're required to have 2 beginning treatment goals for children or adolescents. And if it's a child, I might ask them something like, not what is your treatment goal, I might ask them, what do you think you need to work on while you're here in therapy with me? And then after at the end of the first session, I'll meet with the parents to review the consent for treatment, which is required under state law for clinical social workers, and to discuss 2 beginning treatment goals. Okay, then from the second session onward is when I set up the parents with the active parenting video. Oops, I'm sorry. Okay. I hit the wrong thing here. Let's see. Can someone who knows computers tell me how to get back? Click this one? Oh, okay, thank you. Thank you. You can coach me while I'm... okay, so from the second session onward, then we're going to set the parents up with an active parenting video. We're going to go over the feelings faces with the child, which is a 1-page sheet with about, maybe 20, 22 feeling faces on it. I also asked if they could copy that for you all. It's not a copyrighted feelings faces. I got it from somebody in our office, and you're welcome if you can make copies of it to use it. That takes about 5 minutes. I ask the child, I give them a yellow magic marker, ask them to underline the feeling, or if they're a younger child, they sometimes color in the face, and then I just ask them in what particular way they had that particular feeling. Then the next step is we go over the cognitive behavioral workbook lesson for about 25 minutes. And with younger children then, I do a play therapy session after we've done the cognitive workbook for about 20 minutes. With teens, I often just talk with them about what's going on in their life. Or with teenagers, I often will play a board game. The favorite board game of teenagers is chess. Okay, sorry about the jumping back and forth here. I will. Okay. Oops. Other end. This end. Okay, there we go. Sorry about that. Okay, so then I'm going to give you 3 examples of children and adolescents that I've worked with. And the first one is an 8-year-old boy who's had the symptoms of excessive worry in school, worry about visits with his natural father. His parents are divorced. He lives with his mother and his stepfather, and some separation fears from mom. Assessment, I think he's probably got an adjustment disorder with anxiety. So my intervention plan is we're going to have the mother and the stepfather view active parenting now in 3. We're going to use the Coping Cat workbook with the youngster, and then we're going to do individual play therapy with the youngster. Okay? All right, so this is one of the exercises from the Coping Cat workbook. I'm just taking one exercise for each of my clinical examples here. This is called it's actually an FEAR card. I just did the first 3 letters, fear card. I just did the first 3 letters for this illustration because it goes in stages. So the F stands for, are you feeling nervous? How can you tell? The youngster says, I had a visit with my dad. I was scared. I didn't want my mom to leave. And the reason is this particular youngster hasn't seen his father for like 2 years. So, and apparently during the marriage, the father had some substance abuse, alcohol problems. So the mother was able to get the court to authorize supervised visitation, at least for a couple of months, to try and get the youngster started after not seeing his dad for several years. Okay, the E stands for expecting bad things to happen. He said, I didn't know what my dad would do or say. And then the A stands for attitudes and actions. What can you do to make this situation less fearful? Basically, I'm sorry. He basically went to playing a game with his dad, and that was really done by the person who was supervising it, and he just talked with his dad about the game, and actually the game helped his anxiety considerably. His mother did sit through the first couple sessions just to ease his anxiety. Okay, so then we go to his play themes. Basically, his play themes were toy soldiers with rockets, planes, and vehicles. He's always the good guy. I'm always the bad guy. He initially wins the battles every time by a wide margin, and he also has a protective shield that he stands behind. It's actually behind one of my chairs, and he lines his vehicles and some of his soldiers up behind the protective shield, so no matter how many times I shoot at him, I can't annihilate him. So anyway, but after a few sessions, then he was able to help us. He was able to kind of let down the protective shield a little bit and allow our battles to end in a tie. And then after about 2 months of the battle play, he shifted to wanting to play board games. Okay, next I'm going to show you a little bit of active parenting now in 3, which is for parents of younger children. Okay, what I'm going to show you here is just one segment from the Active Parenting Now in 3. It's called Active Communication.
We've seen how communication blocks can build a wall between us and our children. Now let's see how the 5 steps of active communication can be used to build a bridge that will help us lead our children down the road of cooperation and effective problem solving. This will also keep us in position to influence their thinking about the life and death choices they will eventually face, choices about drugs, sex, crime, and of course, choices about school and career. Without that bridge of communication, parents are left standing by the shore while other influences drag their children and teens into the water. As a wise counselor once said, it's time we stop fishing our children out of the river and go upstream and repair the bridge. Let's watch as Sandra uses active communication to listen actively, listen for feelings, connect feelings to content, look for alternatives and evaluate consequences, and follow up later.
I don't believe it.
You don't believe what?
Mrs. Hickman, I was sitting there minding my own business while Caitlin and Marco passing us back and forth, and because I was between them, they kept giving them to me to pass. Then Mrs. Hickman turned around and sees me passing this note to Caitlin. Only it wasn't for me, it was for Mark. But Mrs. Hickman thought it was for me and gave me extra homework because I apparently have too much time on my hands. Isn't fair.
You sure sound angry.
Yes, wouldn't you? I mean, it wasn't even my own note.
And yet you're the one who got in trouble. I can see why you'd be upset.
And then Caitlin and Mark didn't say a word. They just sat there and giggled.
You must have been furious.
Yeah, they started and let me take all the blame.
And of course, all Mrs. Hickman saw was you passing the note. I guess you were a little embarrassed too when Mrs. Hickman disciplined you in front of the whole class.
Yeah, the other kids saw what was going on, so it wasn't that bad. But now I have all this homework to do. It isn't fair. I'm not going to do it.
And what would happen if you don't do it?
I guess Miss Hickman give me an F to average in with my grades.
Ouch, that could really hurt, especially after all the hard work you've put in this year. What else could you do?
I could tell her what really happened.
Yes, you could. And what do you think would happen then?
The other kids would call me a tattletale, and Mrs. Hickman would just tell me I had no business passing notes anyway, that I should have ignored them.
What do you think about that?
I guess it was pretty dumb. I guess that she doesn't allow passing notes and all, but Mom, I didn't want the other kids to think I'm not cool.
I see. You were afraid they wouldn't like you if you followed Mrs. Hickman's rules about passing notes, so you let them get you in trouble because you wanted them to like you.
Yeah, pretty dumb, wasn't it?
Well, let's put it this way. It's only dumb if you do it again. It may be a mistake that you can learn something from. Oh, Ramon, I've been meaning to ask, how did that note passing problem work out? Did you do the extra homework?
Yeah, I didn't think an F would be too great.
And how about Mark and Caitlin? Are they still asking you to pass notes in class?
No way. I told them I didn't like what they did, and that next time was just going to ignore them.
Attaboy, I like the way you stood up for yourself. It's smart not to let people take advantage of you.
Active communication can work wonders between parents and children, but like any skill, it requires practice.
Okay, so in summary, this is an 8-year-old boy. I've seen him actually 11 sessions spread over a 5-month period. I'm still seeing this client, but we've spaced it out now, so I only see him about once a month. He's made some gains in self-confidence, being less anxious or worried. The supervised visits with his father started in August and seem to be going pretty well. He's expressed his feelings well in play therapy and has moved, as I said, from play therapy themes into board games. Okay, so for my next example, is a 13-year-old girl. She's in 8th grade at charter school. The presenting problem is she's having a failing grade in science, lacking confidence and motivation. She's shy and has difficulty making friends. The assessment initially has adjustment disorder with mixed depression and anxiety, and rule out attention deficit disorder. The intervention plan is we're going to try active parenting teens with her mother, and mood management skills workbook with the girl, and a Connors 3 to rule out attention deficit disorder. Okay, oops, sorry about that. Okay, so what we actually, as I said, the mood management workbook for teens is a 6-session program. So with this particular girl, that's the exact number of sessions I did was 6, and she did show a pretty dramatic improvement within that 6-session format. Okay, so in the last unit of the mood management skills workbook, there's a activity called making an action plan. So this is the girl's action plan. The first, what you have to do in the action plan is define the emotion that's caused you the most difficulty. For her, it was sadness. This emotion has stopped her from having fun. The small goal that she wants to achieve is to be happier and more carefree. Okay? Her first goal under that is to don't let any little thing knock me down. The specific steps she's going to take in her action plan are don't assume things that people might be thinking about me. And the last part in her goal is to be more confident. And in order to do that, the steps she's going to take are to relax and remember that I'm just a person who makes mistakes sometimes and that I'm a good person. So this girl really within a very short format of 6 sessions integrated the cognitive behavioral thinking ideas, and her mother also really I think got a lot out of the active parenting sessions, and the mother was pretty perfectionistic in her demands of this child, and I think in viewing the active parenting videos was able to see that she was being a little bit overly demanding and perfectionistic. So what I'm going to do now is switch to one of the active parenting of teens videos. Unfortunately, this video, this CD is going to have to, if I can get it started, it's going to have to play an introduction. No. Same thing I did about an hour ago when I was practicing. Okay, so for whatever reason, it doesn't want to play that particular video. So if I can, I'm just going to shut my computer down here and go back to the PowerPoint. And if I can't get back to the PowerPoint, I'm going to have to wing it. Okay, yeah, this actually did the same thing, and then we did try and download it to a flash drive, and it wouldn't download to the flash drive. Okay. All right. Okay, so I'm not sure that the same thing happened while I was rehearsing about an hour ago, so I doubt that we're going to get it back. So I apologize for that, and I'm just going to have to wing it with as best I can. I don't think I'm going to be able to get it back up. Okay, so the summary of the girl that I just told you about is she's a 13-year-old girl that was seen for 6 sessions spread over a 3-month time period. She made gains in her school grades, self-confidence, improved. Her symptoms of depression and anxiety, which were quite mild, decreased markedly. We did review the results of the Connors 3 that was completed by the girl, self-report, one by her mother and one by her teacher. The results of the Connors 3 basically indicated that she did have some definite learning problems, some peer problems in terms of not being able to relate to peers very well, and she also had some academic challenges. There was some indication of inattention on her mother's Connors 3, but it did not seem severe enough, and the fact that she showed some significant improvement during the therapy was indication enough that we didn't need to refer her for any further evaluation of her attention deficit disorder. Okay, I think I am stuck and not going to be able to get this thing back on. So I'm just going to have to wing it and go over the third case, which is the most difficult one. It's a 13-year-old 8th grade boy who was referred to me because of a lot of problems with low school grades, acting out behavior, including alcohol and drug abuse, arguing with his parents. And this particular youngster, really, my initial diagnosis of him was oppositional defiant disorder. He had a very angry mood and a bad attitude about coming to therapy initially. I was able to engage him with some effort. So once again, we evaluated him and then plugged the parents in with the active parenting of teens. And in his case, because of his acting out behavior, we did a number of things. We did the active parenting video. We did a number of family therapy sessions in which he was involved with his mom and his dad to work on setting boundaries and limits for this youngster, since his acting out behavior was pretty severe. The other thing I didn't say initially was he had, because of his drug and alcohol abuse, had been referred by his public school to the juvenile court system, so he already had an assigned probation officer. So I did contact the probation officer during the time that this youngster was in therapy to provide some feedback for the probation officer on this youngster's progress. Now, the workbook that I used with this particular youngster was the anger management workbook, and this youngster did have a lot of anger issues. As I began to work with him, I found that his anger was largely vented at his parents, which is not that unusual for a teenager in general, but a lot of his anger actually was at how he was treated by, he wasn't like, I guess he didn't acknowledge that he was like physically abused by his older brother when he was younger, but he acknowledged what he considered a lot of rough treatment and a lot of kind of verbal downgrading when he was a youngster. And his older brother had already graduated from high school and was going to college, but a lot of his frustration and anger centered around the fact that he felt he was badly treated by his older brother when he was younger, and he wouldn't even talk to his older brother when he called on the telephone or when he came home from visits from college. Okay, so in terms of the anger management workbook, he actually picked up the concepts quite well, and he was able to understand the thoughts, feelings, behavior sequence quite well, and he was able to map out his own cognitive sequence with his parents. Basically, what he said was that the trigger events in conflicts with his parents were when they asked him to do things like his homework or his chores, that then he would get frustrated and angry. That would be his thoughts, like, why do I have to do this? Why are they always hassling me? And then his feelings would be feelings of frustration and anger. And his behavior was he wanted to try and withdraw from the family by using drugs or alcohol, or just by leaving the household periodically and hanging out with his friends. And then the last part of the sequence was the consequences. And the consequences were, of course, if he went out and smoked marijuana or drank alcohol, his parents would call his probation officer, and then he would end up being detained in juvenile detention. So that wasn't such a good outcome. But the good news is that I saw him for 11 sessions over about a 10-month period, and he did really seem to engage pretty well in the cognitive behavioral program, and his arguing with his parents declined quite considerably. He did have random urine testing through the juvenile court center, and he was able to stay clean for probably, I think it was the last 5 months he was in therapy. All of his urine screens were clean, and he did bring his school grades up to mostly C's and B's from D's and F's, so he did make quite a considerable effort, and the family did seem to benefit from the active parenting and also from the family therapy sessions that we did. And I feel unfortunate that we lost our system here, but it happened to me before when I was practicing. So I would have loved to have shown you the Active Parenting of Teens video, because I think the Active Parenting of Teens video has undergone 3 revisions since I've actually been using it. This is the most recent revision, which occurred in 2008, and with each revision it tends to get a little bit better. So anyway, in summary, what I've done in my practice is I've used the parenting videos to try and help parents learn parenting skills by watching video examples and then discussing those with them after I see their teen or child. With the child or the adolescent, what I've tried to do is primarily work with them on these cognitive behavioral workbooks that I use, and then we have done some screening, of course, for attention deficit for several of these youngsters. I forgot to mention on the 13-year-old acting out boy that he had an older sister who had attention deficit. She was a junior in high school, and she was on Adderall. So the parents actually took the youngster. We did a Connors questionnaire before the Connors 3 came out. Before the Connors 3 came out, there was only a parent report and a teacher report. With the advent of the Connors 3, which came out in January of 2008, they added a self-report for children 8 or above. So anyway, when I did this youngster, which was back in 2007, we didn't have the self-report. But anyway, the parent Connors on him was high for emotional lability, and it was high for oppositional behavior. No surprise. But the attention deficit scales were really not high at all, and the teacher rating was just flat. I mean, there was no elevation in any of the scores for the teacher. So basically, my feeling was that this youngster was more oppositional defiant. But the parents went ahead and took the youngster to their daughter's child psychiatrist, and he said, well, maybe he has ADHD, let's try him on some meds. So they did try the youngster on some Adderall, and he did comply with taking it, and it did, I think, help him with his school concentration and his school focus. And as I said, during the period of the last 5 months of his therapy, he was drug and alcohol free, so he did make quite a bit of progress. Okay, so unfortunately, I feel badly that the video crashed on me, but these things happen with video equipment. So, but the active parenting programs, as I said, are designed primarily to do with parent groups. I have done parent groups in the past, but the issue is that I think they're tremendously educational in terms of helping parents learn better parenting techniques. One of the concepts taught in active parenting that I really like is they have 3 parenting styles. There's the dictator parent, the doormat parent, and the active parent. The dictator parent tries to basically dictate everything to the child in a very autocratic fashion. And that works when children are younger. It doesn't work well with teens. With teens, you have to engage in a relationship of communication and talking, which helps teenagers to try and feel like they're being heard or understood. And of course, with teenagers, we do have some doormat parents. Doormat parents are the parents who just let the child do whatever the child wants. And those children, obviously, teenagers escalate behaviorally and get out of control. Another example in active parenting, which is good, is about who owns the problem. Does the parent own the problem, or does the child own the problem? And most of the time, we would assume that maybe because the child's misbehaving that they own the problem. But in many cases, it's the parent's goals that are being thwarted by the child or adolescent's behavior. So one of the nice things about the active parenting program is it teaches parents the difference between goals that are being thwarted of the parent and the goals of the child, and that gives the parents ideas in terms of giving what we call logical consequences to the child's behavior. Okay, a consequence that parents of adolescents often give if a child misbehaves, they usually ground them. And grounding can be a very appropriate consequence. But what I find with parents of teenagers is they start out with a short grounding, like maybe for a few days, and then if the child reoffends the same behavior, then they lengthen the consequence to maybe a week, and then if the child reoffends, then they lengthen the consequence to 2 weeks, and then sometimes, depending on the parent, they might lengthen the consequence to a month. They might lengthen it to an entire school quarter. I've seen parents do that for kids who have low school grades. Now, this is not really necessarily part of the active parenting program, but when I work with parents, I try and help them understand that long consequences are not necessarily more effective than shorter ones. So if you have your child on a grounding for 1 month, that means that you as a parent, if you're going to adequately enforce the grounding, you're going to be grounded for a month too. You're going to have to keep them away from cell phones, computer, TV, whatever, in order to enforce that for a month. It's going to become a month-long power struggle. So what I try and get parents to do in terms of discipline and setting consequences is set a shorter time for grounding and then reset the time frame to the exact same time frame the second time, the third time, the fourth time, whatever. So if it's, for example, a 3-day grounding, then you just set it for 3 days. If the child reoffends, you set it for 3 more days. And then, of course, we're also trying to teach parents to talk with their child about the offending behavior, about making better choices, about what they could do if they make better choices, and how they could get their privileges back. What happens when you take a child's privileges away for an entire month or entire school quarter? They tend to give up, and in many cases they tend to get depressed or anxious or frustrated, and they may just hold themselves up in their room. So generally, my experience is that parents don't get good results when they extend the consequences over long time periods. The other thing that active parenting does, which is really nice, and I wish I could have shown you an example, they have a very nice sequence for a child who's suspected of using drugs and alcohol. They have a very nice sequence of showing how the parents actually sat down with the child and handled that particular problem. They have a very nice sequence in showing parents how to do that. The other thing that they do in the active parenting of teens is really try and encourage active communication with teens, because a lot of parents communicate with their teenagers in such a way that they tend to cut off communication, and they don't do it out of bad intention. They just do it out of frustration and trying to get the teenager to listen or to behave. And so consequently, when the communication is shut off, generally they're not able to problem solve or work through problems with their teenager in a very effective manner. So the active parenting is very good in terms of illustrating ways of that the parent can communicate more effectively with their teen. The other component that it has for both the child version and the teen version is what's called a family meeting. The format for the family meeting that's outlined in the workbook is very simple, basically. It's a once-a-week family meeting where the family members have an agenda. The agenda is posted on the refrigerator. Any family member can write an item on the agenda that they want to have at the family meeting. I did have a youngster, not the one that I gave in the examples here from the program, but another youngster whose behavior at home is a lot of just kind of whining, defiance when he's asked to do his chores, staying on the computer too long, that kind of stuff. So I asked the parents to try a family meeting at home after they watched the active parenting video. And each time they came back with the youngster, no family meeting. So finally I decided I had to take the bull by the horns and conduct a family meeting right in my office. So that's exactly what I did. And then I sent them out with another assignment, conduct a family meeting at home. Came back to the next session 3 weeks later, no family meeting. Okay, so this tells me that, you know, I've got a very bright, intelligent family here. Both parents are extremely bright people. But for whatever reason, they don't have the capability to follow through on implementing some of these procedures that they're learning in the active parenting. So we go right back to it and do another family meeting right in a family session. So the way the family meeting works in active parenting is you have a chairperson of the family meeting, and that could be one of the kids, or it can be a parent, and you have a recorder who takes notes. The agenda in the family meeting is, the first part of the family meeting is compliments. Each family member has to give a compliment to the other family members. The second part of the agenda is old business, like could be chores, allowances, getting to bed on time, whatever has been discussed at previous meetings. Then there's a section for new business. And after new business, there's a family activity. A family activity could be playing a game together. A family activity could be baking cookies together at home. A family activity could be going to the park together as a family. So there's all kinds of things people can do as a part of the family meeting. So what I did with this particular family who wasn't able to implement the family meetings at home is we played Uno together at the end of the family meeting, and man, were they competitive Uno players. I mean, it's like, whew, incredibly competitive, which really kind of surprised me because I didn't picture that as being part of their MO. So anyway, like I say, the active parenting concept, some people can see the videos and actually go back and implement them. I had a parent of another girl I'm seeing, a teenager who's a 9th grader who's got bipolar disorder, and she's got a tremendous range of problematic behaviors and a lot of problems with peers. And one of the assignments in the active parenting video in both the child version and the adolescent teen version is writing a letter of encouragement to your child. So this is actually the child's stepfather. It's not her natural father. So he watched that video about writing a letter of encouragement, and he went home within that same week and wrote a letter of encouragement to his stepdaughter, who has bipolar disorder, and tried to point out some of the good things that she does and some of the things that he really likes. And he also wrote a letter of encouragement to his older stepson, who is a junior in high school. And I thought that was pretty impressive for a stepfather to, come up to the plate and take some material from the active parenting video and actually put it to use immediately. So, okay, well, I think I'm going to stop there because I'm obviously not going to get the video working, and I apologize for that. And technical difficulties are part of our computer age. So, does anybody have any questions they would like to ask? If any of you would have interest at any time in seeing the active parenting videos in more detail, if any of you have any interest in that, I could give you my my office email, and you could email me, and we could arrange for you to come into the office if you'd like to see some of them. They're really excellent videos, and they really are helpful in giving parents ideas at handling child and teen behavior. I'm so sorry that we only saw a very brief clip of one video. Yes, Dr. Guman. Yes.
Actually, I'm sorry that the video didn't work, but I'm happy to hear your list of work. I think the thing you mentioned, that's really very helpful. One question I have is, like, you talked about CBT for teenagers.
Yes.
I'm kind of curious if you can give some examples of CBT which you use in play therapy with younger kids. How do you do it? Like you're doing play therapy with 5, 6-year-old kids.
Well, actually, I don't integrate too much CBT into the play therapy process itself. Like, let's say with a 5-year-old child, I probably wouldn't be doing CBT. I would be doing the feelings faces thing, and then I would be talking with a child about how their feelings might be manifested in home behavior, school behavior. So I probably wouldn't use the framework of, trigger, thoughts, feelings, behavior, and consequence. I probably wouldn't use that framework exactly with a younger child. But as I said, the anger management workbook, I've used that with kids as young as 6. I read it to them. They're like first graders. But I read it to them, and I find that even a first grader can pick up the concepts in the anger management workbook. So I really don't, when I do play therapy, I really don't integrate the CBT into it, although there are some articles out there written by some play therapists who have actually tried to integrate those concepts into their play therapy. So I think there has been a precedent. One of them, her name is Athena Drews. It's spelled D-R-E-W-E-S. You could probably Google her if you wanted to see. She's written an article on the integration of play therapy and CBT. So her name is Athena Drews, and if you Googled her, I'm sure you could find her article. Any other questions? I apologize about the video. That was really the majority of the presentation, and things happen, so I apologize for that, and appreciate you all coming and sticking with me. Bye-bye.